You know, I wasn't a very partisan person before the botched pandemic hit. And I'm still not, like, in my DNA. I have always been a political whore. I will vote for anyone who shares my interests. And the COVID response, the botched COVID response, and the damage that's been done to our society and our children and our trust and all of the things that are important to me, my top 10, have been completely decimated by Democrats. Were Republicans perfect? No. No, 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 no. Right? Nobody's saying that. But Republicans were infinitely better than Democrats. Democrats as a block, okay, as a hold hands block of thought, strategy, enforcement, media, messaging, were all in alignment, all of them. Now, the problem with Republicans is that we had some that were immediately right out of the gate like, no, this, you know, this cannot stand. This is this is not the right way to go. There were no Democrats that did that. There were none. There were no Democrat signers of the Great Barrington Declaration. Well, I take that back. I think some of them were, in terms of the experts and even the citizens and the normies. But no politicians, no leaders, no Democrats were on the side of sanity and sort of public health best practice. There were a good number of Republicans from the beginning, and they just built, you know. The headwinds of the media and the narrative were very strong back then, and we really can't forget that context. And I know that I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing people forget that context. And that's why I have a lot of sympathy for the early Ron DeSantis. I have a lot of sympathy for Trump, what he went through. I'll never forgive him for approving the lockdowns, but he was sandbagged. He was fooled by these so-called experts. But I have never seen a political party that united around a set of ideas and strategies as I saw the Democrats around COVID. And this includes lockdowns, this includes, you know, closing schools. All of this stuff was so incredibly harmful and so incredibly one-sided. There were zero dissenters that I remember on the Democrat side. And if you think about our politics and how they roll sometimes, I can't really think of one thing that the Republicans are that locked on. Yeah, I think a lot of people would say abortion, but no, there's a ton of pro-life Republicans, right? It is not a solid voting bloc when Republican stuff comes up. And, you know, they say that a lot, that the Democrats are much more disciplined in their partiness than the Republicans are. And it drives Republicans crazy, you know, because they'll have, you know, a tax cut or, you know, something on, I don't know, whatever it is. And they'll always have a couple bozos that, you know, make them fall short of the magic number or whatever. But the Democrats very rarely experience that. And again, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because based on their policies, I think it's a bad thing for the country. But again, from the jump, it was solid blue with the COVID tyranny, with this insanity of lockdowns. He's never before tried, attempted, or even really considered mitigation strategies for a sickness sweeping through, a global pandemic. And I couldn't believe it, because I lived in deep, deep blue, you know, suburbs of New York. And it was something that only had previously affected me in terms of ridiculously high taxes. And, you know, some social stuff. Because I'm a moderate. You know, I'm in the middle. You know, because I'm very liberal on some things, and I'm pretty conservative on other things. And there's a lot of people like me, you know. But what I don't do is sit around bitching that there's no party for me. There's my party. No. I actually like the two-party system, believe it or not. I think this ranked choice stuff is insane, and this is a yet another one of their awful theoretical ideas that they shove down everybody's throats under the threat of racism or whatever it is that you're accused of. If you're like, hey, this doesn't seem like a good idea, it doesn't really work. But as somebody who isn't naturally very partisan, again, I'm not a party guy. I'm not waving my flag. I have been a Democrat in the recent past, and even when I was younger, and most people are much more socialistic, I would say, when they're young and naive. It's true. Even then, I wasn't like wearing the D t-shirt. I think it's a little bit of a Charlie Chaplin. You know, I'm not a groupist. But that said, even when I was young, dumb, and full of Marxism, which I never really was, but definitely a little bit, again, just like everybody, I also was smart enough, thankfully, to know that I didn't agree with the Democrat Party on everything, right? And so here comes the pandemic rolling through, and most of the public health establishment, and I mean by most, I mean 99.99%, and definitely the controlling arm of it, took over. And they forced us to do all sorts of absolutely hideous, never before tried efforts that have just destroyed us. We are still living in the aftermath of this madness. And for some of us, it was obvious from the start that this was a stupid idea. But what was alarming to me, again, right off the bat, was how little dissent there was in the Democratic ranks. And by little dissent, I mean none. It was, to call it lockstep is, you know, conjures up Pink Floydian, you know, jackbooty kind of stuff. And it was, with the tyranny, it was definitely that vibe. There was no alternate opinion allowed in the Democrat Party. It wasn't an alternate opinion allowed in the media, but the Democrat Party, from, you know, late February, when they decided that they were going to, you know, they were in this thing to win this thing, they never veered. They never had anybody that raised their hand and said, this doesn't seem, should we be doing this? This is pretty draconian. Is this a good idea? Is this working? What's going on? No. They all fell in line, and it was to get Trump, and it was to punish the half of the country that voted for him. And I'll say this again, whether or not you like Trump, it doesn't matter, because what they did to us was a consequence of what they were trying to do to him. And I don't want to say COVID was an excuse, but it was certainly a vehicle. And the fact that they all got on board and stayed on board and drove it, like they were fighting for the steering wheel, these idiots. And it's over 2.5 years. Not only was it COVID stuff, it was defund the police. You know, hey, you know, nobody likes the police, you know, shooting unarmed people, but you really think the solution is to no more police? I mean, these are, you know, junior high school smoking pot for the first time kinds of ideas. And somehow our society was taken over by these people and these ideas. And these ideas were firmly, consistently, and provably, and obviously straight out of the Democrat Party. And again, with like 100% backing. And as somebody who is not a partisan person, this is a very easy decision for me. I'm not going to vote for another D for the foreseeable future. And again, it's not because I like pulling that R, but it's like, you know, if you fly Delta and Delta, doesn't save your seat for you and loses your luggage every time, and treats you like shit, and like you're not going to fly Delta anymore. Like there's a certain point where you're like, okay, I've seen the pattern, I know what I'm going to get, and that's where we are. Hey, again, I'm not that doctrinaire. I'm not that much of a groupist. I mean, I like the Mets. I don't think I'm going to switch sports teams, but that's different. The Mets aren't trying to ruin my kids' lives. The Mets aren't, playing politics with the economy and destroying our way of life. The Mets are a bad example, but you know what I mean. I know politics is a team sport. I don't like that about it, but there are reasons why we have the two-party system, like it or not, and you have a polar choice. It's the turd sandwich or the giant douche, and I don't know which one is which, but because that was a great episode, but it is obvious who did this to us. And yeah, again, the Republicans voted for some of this stuff. Voted for a lot of the spending. That's a big part of what's hurting the economy. Trump, pushed that stuff. That's valid. But again, it is a lesser of two evils thing here. Not voting is not an option. I don't want to sound like an MTV PSA, but you have to vote, and I'm going to vote, and I'm going to vote R down the line. I don't care. These people, like the top 10 issues that I care about and we care about that matter to us are firmly in the red column. Firmly. There's other things we can talk about, but the pressing issues of our society right now, and again, most of them coming right out of this botched pandemic response, are wholly owned by the Democrat Party. So, good job, dum-dums.